Hi guys, it's me KazarHD and welcome to qualifying day for the first ever Miami Grand Prix, of course, this year in 2022. Yesterday we had Friday practice 1 and practice 2, and some interesting talking points have absolutely come out of yesterday, and it's looking actually, the field, pretty close coming into qualifying. I don't think it'll be as close as it looked in, say, practice 2, and I think certain cars in practice 2 and also practice 1 even probably looked a bit quicker than they actually will be when it really matters in qualifying. But we do have absolutely an exciting grid or exciting qualifying session coming up later tonight to set the grid, of course, for the Sunday race in Miami. Hopefully you guys, by the way, are doing well. Hopefully you're as excited as me for qualifying day to see what goes down, whether Mercedes can join the fight with Ferrari and Red Bull, what happens between the top two teams of Ferrari and Red Bull. Can Alpine get a good result because they're looking pretty good? What can McLaren do? And obviously, what can the rest of the teams do? It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And honestly, I'm expecting it to be an exciting session. I don't think you're going to get say two cars from the same team that close together on the grid. I really don't think you will. I think you'll get like a mix of cars in certain parts of the order where it's like 5 different teams or something in a row in some part of the grid. I think it's going to be all over the place really in qualifying later. And of course in this stream I'm going to preview what to expect from qualifying and what I think will happen in qualifying later. I'll give my predictions for all of the teams and where I expect them to be. And also, in a moment actually, I will get into, the data behind practice 2 and look at what teams came out of practice 2, which obviously is the most important session of Friday practice. I'll look at who came out of that session looking good and who didn't, looking at sector time data and obviously the lap times and all of that. So we'll get into that in just a second. Just want to say again, hopefully you guys are excited. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully no matter what time it is in your part of the world, hopefully you're having as best a day as possible. For me, it's a very hot and sunny weekend in my part of the UK. So yeah, I'm absolutely boiling hot, I have to say. But hopefully it'll cool down a bit later for when qualifying begins. Of course, qualifying is in 9 hours from now, 6 hours from now. Practice 3 starts in 3 hours from now. So it'll be a busy day for me and a busy day overall, of course, at the track for this Miami Grand Prix. Now, let's get into the results of practice 2. Of course, like I said a moment ago, the most important practice session really of the weekend, because it takes place in the most representative conditions in terms of the time of day and the temperatures, all of that. So let's now get into the results for anyone who missed those results yesterday. So here is the final classification. So George Russell finished P1 in the Mercedes. That's the first time Mercedes have topped a session, I think, since practice 2 at Imola. But I don't think they've topped many practice sessions this season. I think that one at Imola and this one here might be the only two. Maybe there's one more that I can't remember, but yeah, it's been a bit of a rarity. And he's the only man, Russell, to get under 1 minute 30 with a 1 minute 29.9. Then Charles Leclerc was second, Sergio Perez third, Lewis Hamilton fourth, Fernando Alonso 5th, Lando Norris 6th, and then Gasly, Zhou Guanyu, Esteban Ocon, and Kevin Magnussen completing the top 10. And what I was saying a moment ago with, I think you're going to get lots of different cars at similar parts of the grid, or the same part of the grid. I think you can kind of see that, or with the practice 2 results, with an Alpine in 5th, McLaren in 6th, an AlphaTauri in 7th, an Alfa Romeo in 8th, another Alpine in 9th, but then a Haas in 10th. So yeah, I think you're going to get a very competitive qualifying later. Carlos Sainz P11, that's of course because he crashed out in practice 2. He definitely has, Carlos, more pace in his car than what he showed. And if he just doesn't crash and make mistakes, Carlos has definitely more performance in there. Daniel Ricciardo ended up P12, and then Yuki Tsunoda 13th, Sebastian Vettel 14th, Mick Schumacher 15th, and then Stroll, Albon, Latifi complete the order. And then the bottom two is Verstappen and Bottas. Verstappen only did one lap because when he finally came out on track, his brakes, his rear right brake caught on fire, and then he couldn't come out again. So Verstappen will be desperate for some running in practice 3, and hopefully for him has a trouble-free day on the reliability side of things. Or Valtteri Bottas, the reason he did not do any running was because, of course, he crashed heavily, or heavy-ish, I would guess you could say, in practice 1, and I think they had to change the whole rear end of the car and, gearbox and stuff like that. So, not surprised that Bottas was unable to do practice 2, but thankfully for Bottas, by the looks of it, if you look at what Zhou Guanyu did in the Alfa Romeo, finishing up in P8 and being around Ocon, Magnussen and Ricciardo in terms of pace, looks as though Alfa Romeo do have good pace this weekend. So, at least if he gets it together and doesn't make any mistakes, he should be just fine in terms of, having a good result. But that is that was the classification of practice 2. Now let's get into the sector time data to really analyse where certain teams, were quicker than others in the different sectors. Of course, though, I have to say this as a bit of a disclaimer. Of course, in certain sectors of the track, it won't be totally representative, I guess you could say, of what we're going to see later in qualifying, because, say, in a sector of the track where it's mostly, full throttle, because certain teams might not be using their highest or as high of an engine mode as others, then that might skew things. I think we can absolutely agree on that being possibly the case. So, when we look at these sector times, do not take these sector times as absolute fact for what is going to happen later on, because I do think certain teams like Ferrari and Red Bull have probably more power left to show and to turn up to than, say, Mercedes do. So, yeah, I think we need to remember that when getting into it. And also, for this data and for the graphic, credit to @LightsOutF1 blog for this. He's a great Twitter account. If you do want to follow him, then you probably should, because like I said, he is very, very good. And here is the sector time data from practice 2. So Mercedes in sector 1 were pretty much equal, but just ahead of Ferrari in sector 1. Sector 2, you can see Mercedes losing a lot of time there. Now, sector 2, the first half of Sector 2 is flat out, and then the second half of Sector 2 is very slow, which is why Mercedes are slower than Ferrari and Red Bull, because they're losing still quite a bit of time on the straights, but they're not losing as much as they would in that sector because of the slow corners in the second half of the middle sector. And then Sector 3, I have to say, quite impressive from Mercedes to be quickest in Sector 3. Now, I don't think they'll be this quick, honestly, in qualifying, because like I said, I think Red Bull and Ferrari are probably the ones holding back the most in terms of their performance, and I think have the most still to show when it really gets down to it in qualifying. But Mercedes' pace is definitely improved. Mercedes are looking definitely closer to Red Bull and Ferrari. Not close enough to really fight for pole position or probably fight for the victory this weekend. I don't think that's going to happen. But they are definitely closer, quite a bit closer actually than they were at Imola. Well, I think when it comes to where they'll probably end up, Mercedes, I think Ferrari again, I think they have more to show. I don't think they were quite pushing as hard, or maybe, they had a lot more to show, let's say, than what they showed in practice too. I mean, you can see in Sector 3, Ferrari were, the 7th quickest team in Sector 3. I don't think that's going to be the case in qualifying. They'll probably be, at worst, the 3rd quickest team in Sector 3. So, I think they'll be a lot quicker there. Of course, Carlos Sainz crashing out in practice 2. A man who looked as though he was probably right on the pace with Leclerc, if not quicker, certainly in the first bit of practice 2. If he had finished the session and ended up quicker than Leclerc, then of course that would have helped Ferrari's overall lap time in practice 2. So I think, again, we have to remember that. And also with Red Bull, I still think Red Bull are probably the favourites for pole position today. The reason is because Red Bull, I mean, you can see there at the far right, overall lap, they're only 0.3 of a second off Mercedes. That's with Sergio Perez. Max Verstappen, remember, in practice 2, didn't do a lap time. And we know Verstappen would be quicker in, all of the sectors, pretty much. So I think Red Bull are absolutely the favourites to get pole position. As long as Max Verstappen, and of course we'll get into in a moment, more so Red Bull. As long as Max Verstappen stays trouble-free, like I said a moment ago on the reliability side, I still think he is the clear favourite for pole position. I think this kind of proves it, because they're still quite close to, say, Ferrari in practice 2, in the sectors and overall lap time, with just Sergio Perez. So I think definitely Red Bull are the team to beat coming into qualifying. But for Mercedes, where will they be? Most likely in what do you call it? In qualifying, I think most likely. I mean, you can see here it's the ideal lap for the all of the sector times. It says Mercedes are 1/10.5 clear. Ferrari and Red Bull, like I said, I think Ferrari and Red Bull, they probably have their engines turned down more so than Mercedes do. Yesterday. So I think you'll probably see Ferrari be at least, say, 0.3 of a second clear of the Mercedes team. And I do think Ferrari are most likely to be the 2nd quickest team in qualifying. And then Red Bull, I think, will probably end up at least 0.5 a second clear. So they are closer because, of course, plenty of sessions this season, Mercedes have been like a second a lap off the pace. So, if they're only 0.5 a second or maybe even 0.7 of a second off, which is still quite a bit off the pace for them especially, at least it's an improvement. That's all that matters at the moment, is just, making those improvements. Also, I am impressed with Haas F1 with these sector times, because Sector 1 and Sector 3, they are pretty much best of the rest, and actually are best of the rest. The only sector where they do poorly is Sector 2. Now, maybe that's because they had their power unit turned down a bit. Hopefully, from their point of view, they did, because if they, finally turn it up and they continue to show that kind of speed in Sector 1 and Sector 3, then Haas F1 could be very, very good today. And the only other teams really to look at in terms of interest is probably AlphaTauri and Alpine, who also look pretty good in Sector 2 and Sector 3. Yeah, I'd say those two teams are definitely probably in there, with McLaren also as trying to fight for that best of the rest tag. So really what we have, I think, in terms of the pecking order for qualifying in terms of who has the quickest cars, I still think Red Bull are probably the quickest, with Verstappen obviously out there on track doing the laps. Ferrari then 2nd, Mercedes 3rd, but closer to the top 2 teams, and then probably it will be, I'm not sure who would be 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th, honestly, fastest teams. It's between McLaren, Haas, Alpine and AlphaTauri. And it also, I think Alfa Romeo, I think they'll play a role in there as well. So it can be very interesting to see in that midfield who comes out on top. But at least from Mercedes' point of view, at least they have closed the gap. I think we could definitely say that. And they will definitely be closer to pole position today than we have seen so far this season. I think the closest they got was Bahrain, which was, what, half a second or 0.6 of a second? If they were to get... if they were to be that far off at the end of qualifying today, I would actually be... Well, I'm not a Mercedes fan, but if I was a Mercedes fan, I would be actually quite happy with that, considering that Imola, it was a lot more. And Australia and Saudi, it was a lot more. In Australia and Saudi, it's about a second per lap. So, yeah, hopefully they can continue that in qualifying. Now let's get into the teams. We'll start with Ferrari. And yeah, Ferrari, I don't think still have the ultimate best car for this track. They're still going to be very close in contention for pole position. There is no doubt about that. They do have two very good drivers who, when they're not crashing, when they're absolutely on it, can produce great performances. There is no doubt about that. But this man on screen, Carlos Sainz, he really does need a confidence boosting qualifying session where he gets, say, a front row start or even pole position. He needs it desperately, because with the amount of mistakes he's making, if he doesn't get good results to give him confidence, then I don't see him getting out of this rut anytime soon, because you can't really get confidence going if you keep having accidents and you keep failing to, I guess, reach your potential position in certain sessions. I know it's only practice too, but it will absolutely play on his confidence. There is no doubt about that. And he does need a big result today. If he can out-qualify his teammate, which, honestly, if you look at practice 1 and practice 2, Carlos, like I said, he was absolutely on the pace of his teammate Charles Leclerc. He just, again, made the mistake he made in practice 2, and that, has probably sunk his confidence even lower when his pace was looking pretty good. So if he can, like I said, out-qualify Leclerc, that would be, I think, definitely a big confidence boost for him and a big one-up on Charles Leclerc, even though he is already pretty much going to be playing number 2 to Leclerc for the rest of the season, because Leclerc is so far ahead of him in the championship. So, yeah, Carlos needs desperately a big weekend. If Carlos has another crash today in qualifying and ends up, I don't know, 5th or worse, then his confidence is going to be at record lows. And with his home Grand Prix only in 2 weeks' time, it's not a great time to be having this type of form, is it? Just he's not in any good shape at all. But hopefully, he will keep it together in qualifying later. Like I said, the Ferrari car, it is good enough for pole position, but it's only good enough for pole position, I feel, if it's only good enough for pole position if the drivers pull out everything they can on that final lap in qualifying. If they don't quite get the most out of their cars, then they're going to probably end up where I expect them to end up, which is 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 4th. You never know what, of course, Sergio Perez could do in the 2nd Red Bull. So, yeah, I think Ferrari, they're still in the fight. They're still right there. We'll see what happens in qualifying. I think Charles Leclerc is most likely going to be the highest placed Ferrari driver. The reason I would say that is because I just think he has the most confidence out of the two drivers. And if you look at qualifying so far this season, Charles Leclerc has been not perfect, but as close to perfect, I think, as you could probably get. So I think most likely you'll see Charles Leclerc qualifying 2nd, and then probably Carlos Sainz, you'd have to say 4th, maybe even 5th. It depends on how he recovers from what happened yesterday, but hopefully he can recover, because there is definitely good pace from him in that car this weekend. Now let's go on to Red Bull Racing. And yeah, Red Bull, I think, do have still the car to beat in qualifying and for the race also this weekend. Sergio Perez, I mean, if we go back to the practice 2 results, let me just get those up again. You can see here, Sergio Perez, who is, 99% of the time the slowest Red Bull driver, only 0.2 of a second off Russell, and only a tenth behind Leclerc. So if he is at that pace, then we know Verstappen will absolutely be able to go quicker than that. So I have no doubt whatsoever that Red Bull, in the hands of Max Verstappen, can get pole position. Will they be able to get a 1-2 finish? It's going to be tough, because I think Leclerc, if he hooks the lap together, I think Leclerc could still get close-ish to Verstappen and, could absolutely still get second place on the grid. But we have seen also, so far this season, Sergio Perez has been pretty good in qualifying and not, at times, not that far behind Max. Of course, in Saudi Arabia, he outqualified Max and put it on pole position. So you never know what could happen in Formula 1. So we'll see what happens with Sergio Perez. But yeah, as long as Verstappen, as long as the rear brake temperatures are okay and there's no other reliability gremlins, I think Max Verstappen is the man for pole position. I don't see how Ferrari have quite overall a good enough car to beat the Red Bull this weekend. I mean, I saw on Twitter some data about how even though Ferrari have brought a slimmer rear wing to combat the lack of speed they have down the straights compared to Red Bull, they're still losing 10 kilometers an hour down the straights to Red Bull. That is, around a track like this with 2 very long straights and kind of a near flat out first sector, that's very, very important for Red Bull, and it's a very important advantage for them to have. And also, it's not just a car, this Red Bull car, that is, its only strength is not just straight line speed. Also, aerodynamically, it is pretty nifty, and with the weight that has now been removed from the Red Bull car, and it weighs, I can't remember how much less it weighs compared to the start of the season, probably a few kilograms now that they've been able to take off. It really is, this car, looking in great shape. And yeah, hopefully from Red Bull and Verstappen's point of view, those brake issues and any cooling problems that I think they had as well towards the end of practice 1, hopefully those problems won't arise again. But we'll see, of course. Red Bull, of course, have not been the most reliable this season, and we'll see what they can get up to. But yeah, for me, the team to beat without a doubt. Now, let's go on to the Mercedes team, who are looking at their best so far this season. And it's still not that good, of course, because we're used to them winning all the time. And obviously, they've won the Constructors' Championship, 7 or 8 times in a row. So we're so used to them being so good. And at worst being like second or third on the grid, that, saying that, they're only maybe half a second off the top 2 teams overall for this weekend, saying that that's a good thing, it still feels very, very weird. But the reality is, so far this season, they have been on average a second a lap off the pace of Ferrari and Red Bull, but it looks like so far that they are a few tenths of a second off, I would say, Red Bull and Ferrari. I think definitely certain parts of the circuit are suiting their car, but I don't think it's suiting them that much to the point of, it hiding a lot of their weaknesses. Because we still have 2 very long straights. They still lack a lot of straight line speed to compete with, say, Red Bull in that aspect. The porpoising is still a problem. We saw that in practice 2 yesterday. It's not as bad as we've seen previously, but it's still an issue. So, they are absolutely, definitely improved. But I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's because of the track layout necessarily. I think it's playing a factor, yes, but I don't think it is the absolute main reason. I think the main reason is the upgrades they brought this weekend to the front wing, and the rear wing. I think that's what's made the difference for Mercedes so far this weekend, and hopefully it will continue to see them, being up in, say, 5th and 6th for at the absolute worst. And yeah, if they can be 5, 6, even at worst 7/10 of a second off the pace, I mean, yeah, that's still poor for them, but it's a massive improvement. It really is a massive improvement compared to Imola, where they were like the 5th or 6th fastest team, and they were at best a second a lap off the pace, if not probably 1.2, 1.3 seconds off the pace on average. So it's a massive step forward compared to what we saw at Imola, and it is overall a step forward for the team, but there's still plenty of work to be done, and plenty of this car still needs to be improved. They have some upgrades, I think, coming to the Spanish Grand Prix, which of course we'll see whether they can really start to close the gap to Ferrari and Red Bull. Mercedes still believe that they have fundamentally a good car. They just need to sort out the bouncing, the porpoising, so they can get, to run their car closer to the ground, thus get more performance out of it because of these new regulations. The closer you run your car to the ground, because it's the ground effect era, the more downforce you're going to get. So we'll see, obviously, in 2 weeks, whether they can really start to close things up. And I think definitely in Spain, you'll see them closer anyway, because I think that track will suit their car better than, say, a track like this or a track before. So, positive, I would say, for Mercedes, but still a lot of work to be done. I think that what they're probably going to end up being is 5th and 6th on the grid, unless, one of the Red Bulls or one of the Ferraris has an accident or just a really bad lap, or but some bad luck or something like that. It will be interesting, though, to see whether this man on screen, Mr. Saturday himself, George Russell, whether he will be able to out-qualify Lewis Hamilton yet again. It looks like he's probably going to, because he just looks more comfortable in the car. And we know, over a single lap, this guy is one of the quickest in Formula 1. Is he the quickest? I don't think we have the evidence yet to suggest he is, but he's definitely top 3, maybe top 4 at the absolute worst for Russell. So, yeah, I think you're probably going to see Russell and Hamilton. We cannot, though, of course, play down Lewis Hamilton, because we know what he's capable of. And if he starts to feel more comfortable in that car and feels like he can really push it, then we know Lewis Hamilton can absolutely be not right up there in terms of fighting with Max and Charles Leclerc, but he can get a very good lap out of that car. We'll see if he can in qualifying today. But yeah, Russell looking very quick, and Mercedes, thankfully, looking better. And I just want to quickly, before I move on to McLaren, I just want to quickly read out a quote from George Russell, who thinks that the improved performance is largely down to the track, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think, again, it's playing a factor. There's no doubt about it. Like that series of slow corners towards the end of the middle sector, the Mercedes actually does look pretty good through there, but I don't think it's playing that big of a role that maybe Russell thinks. But this is what he had to say. He said, "We always knew ahead of this weekend that the conditions should suit us better. We've been struggling a lot with tyre warm-up, even in Bahrain when the track was really rough. But this is the first real hot race of the season." That's a great point by Russell, because, yeah, that's another weakness they've had this season, which people have not really talked about, is their tyre warm-up problems. And like he said, the only other... well, did he actually say that? No, he was saying in Bahrain it was rough to warm up the tyres. And yeah, this I think what he's saying is absolutely bang on the money, because this is the first real hot race of the season. I mean, Australia was also kind of hot, but nowhere near as hot as, we're having for this weekend. And you have to remember the sessions, the qualifying and race sessions at Melbourne take place, after the, say, peak temperature of the day as the sun is going down. So it's going to be, still an issue there, tyre warm-up. But yeah, because, as he says, this is the first real hot Grand Prix, properly hot Grand Prix of the year, that tyre warm-up issue isn't so much of an issue. And also, that will be an advantage for them that we'll have to watch out for in Sunday's race. Because if they're not overheating their tyres that much, which, I mean, if you're struggling consistently to warm up tyres, that normally means that you're not really going to be a team that overheats your tyres. Their tyres just tend to be cooler than others because of the way the car works the tyres, which is not a surprise, by the way. I mean, it's a James Allison racing car. If you look at James Allison designed cars, they always have this problem. When he was Lotus designer, Lotus would have the same problem. They wouldn't be able to fire the tyres up in qualifying, but in the race, they'd be able to not overheat them, and, in the race, they'd always have a quick car. Ferrari, when he went to them, the same. They wouldn't have also the greatest tyre warm-up, and then in the race, they'd be able to look after their tyres, and the same with the Mercedes. So it's a trait of James Allison cars that tyre warm-up tends to be difficult, but it does benefit them in the race, as long as in the race it is hot enough for them to benefit from that. So that is one thing to look out for in the race, and maybe if they're not too far off the pace of Red Bull and Ferrari, maybe that'll see them maybe get a podium. You never know. But yeah, he goes on to say, so for sure that's played a big factor. The car is working well, but it's only Friday. I'm not getting too carried away. And then he admitted the porpoising problem, which has affected the team all season, does appear to have improved. He said, we know that it'll always be there, but maybe it's working at a lower range compared to where we were previously. And then says, for sure, in that high fuel run, I was feeling it, and it didn't seem to be any better. But if we can manage to do that with the car lower to the ground, then obviously we will see the rewards. Because again, the closer you run your car to the ground, the more downforce you're going to get. And then it said, but as I said, you generally have races that sort of go in your favour. Some races that go against you. I think Imola obviously wasn't a strong circuit for us, but so far from what we see, the car is working well around Miami, which again, I think, yeah, to a certain extent it is, but I think, like he said, I think the temperatures are helping with their tyre warm-up problems, but also I think their new front and rear wing upgrades, I think, are really helping as well. So, yeah, looking good for Mercedes, and hopefully they will be able to continue that good performance later today. Now let's get into the McLaren team. Wasn't the most spectacular of practice sessions, practice 2, but Lando Norris was still up in 6th place. We know in qualifying, Lando tends to be consistently top 7 on the grid. We saw this last season. We've seen this already this season. So I'm expecting Lando to be right up there in the top 6, top 7 on the grid at the very worst. Do McLaren have the absolute fastest car out of the same midfield pack for this weekend? I would say, by the way, the Mercedes aren't really part of the midfield pack this weekend, because I think they've already showed that they have improved their car enough to be, I wouldn't say on that top bracket with Ferrari and Red Bull, but probably in between that top bracket and the midfield pack. Are McLaren, are they the quickest out of the midfield pack? I'm not sure. Because again, Haas F1 in a couple of the sectors, they showed in practice 2, they showed some good pace, but just dropped off a lot in sector 2. Also, Alpine looked pretty quick, and of course, Alonso was ahead of Norris in practice 2. Gasly also was very quick, and the AlphaTauri, I think, is going better around here because of the 2 long straights. And of course, AlphaTauri do benefit from having Red Bull powertrains, which is easily the benchmark in terms of power units in Formula 1 in 2022. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a close fight. Hold on, let me just clear my throat. Yeah, I think it's going to be a close fight. I think Norris, like I said, probably will end up top 6, top 7. Most likely, I would probably say, well, you've got the 2 Mercedes, haven't you? So actually, it might be more like top 8, top 9. But I think definitely Norris will be in the top 10. There's no doubt about that. I think you'll probably see Norris 7th or 8th. it's going to be close between him, Alonso, Gasly, Bottas, I think, and also Magnussen. I think those are the drivers you're going to be looking at who are going to be fronting up that midfield pack. With Ricciardo, though, sadly, it looks like Ricciardo is a bit off the pace. If he was to get in the top 10, I think that would be pretty much job well done. I don't think he can really do, from what we've seen so far, I don't think he can really do that much more, because he was, 6-7 tenths of a second off the pace of Norris in practice 2. So, yeah, it's not looking great, let's say, for Ricciardo. I mean, practice 1 I think was decent. He was up in, was it P9, P10? But yeah, practice 2 just didn't show that great a speed. But he'll still be, I'd probably think, at worst, say, 12th, 13th on the grid. So he'll still be in the fight there for the top 10. But obviously, Lando Norris is normally the main man at McLaren and the main one getting, the good results. So we'll see what he can do. But yeah, if Norris can get, say, at worst 8th on the grid, that would be a decent starting position for the race. McLaren don't look to be on the pace of Mercedes this weekend at all. So, yeah, Mercedes are completely in a different fight, I think, compared to McLaren. I mean, McLaren have brought upgrades this weekend. I think a new front suspension and something else. I can't remember what the other upgrade was. Might have been a rear wing or a brake drum or something like that. But yeah, a new front suspension is one of the upgrades they brought to the Miami Grand Prix, and it doesn't seem, from what we've seen so far, to be working that well. Maybe, though, they were sandbagging a bit, and we'll see some more performance today in qualifying. Now, I just want to quickly also read out a story about McLaren, because, of course, we heard the confirmation from the boss, or the CEO, of the VW group, that Porsche and Audi are going to be entering Formula 1 in 2026. And of course, the big rumour is that Audi want to purchase, I think, McLaren's entry to Formula 1. And then obviously that, causes some doubt over whether the McLaren name is going to be in F1. And then, Zach Brown had this to say after that news came out, and he had this to say yesterday. He said, "Our shareholders are very committed to McLaren. We did have conversations with Audi, and we're not for sale. We're very committed to our future. We're doing really well on track. The shareholders have made substantial investments to give our team the resources. We need to get back to the front. Commercially, we're doing really well. Morale on the team is really good. We don't have any interest in selling the race team." However, Brown did not rule out the Mercedes power team becoming Audi engine customers in the future. He said, "We won't consider a buyout of McLaren. It's up to Andreas to decide what power unit he wants in the back of the racing car." I will say that's good that Zach is leaving those decisions up to Andreas, because obviously Andreas has a more hands-on role with the F1 team. But any conversations around buying McLaren is a non-starter, which I hope he keeps that same energy until 2026, because we need McLaren to be on the grid. They're still easily good enough to be competing towards the sharper ends of the grid. They're not, like a Williams who, great name and that, but they're, in terms of a great racing team, those days are long gone. McLaren can still get back there, and I thought this year they would get back to being a race-winning team on a consistent or more consistent basis, but sadly, it hasn't happened, so we'll see if it can happen in the next 2 or 3 years. But I think hopefully they will keep that same energy in regards to the sale of McLaren. What I'm hoping is that, if McLaren do a deal with Audi where Audi supply them power units, then that would be, I think, a good deal, a good compromise if the money from Audi is too good to turn down or anything like that. If Audi want to buy an F1 team, though, I think it'd be better to buy, if they were to buy McLaren, that would be spectacular for them, because McLaren they're competing at the sharper ends of the grid. They're 4th in the Constructors' Championship currently, and they're going to be probably for the next 2 or 3 years like a top 4, top 5 team, probably at worst top 4 team in F1. If they were to buy them, then of course that would give them a massive head start on, say, where Toyota were when they entered Formula 1, and Audi would immediately be able to compete for, say, good midfield points in their first year or two. When Toyota, their first year Toyota they actually weren't that bad in terms of pace, the Toyota team. Of course, Toyota went with their own team. They didn't buy a team from 2001. Went with their own team. The pace, like I said, of the 2002 car was pretty good, actually, for a first-year Toyota. They just didn't get that many points finishes. I think they only had 1, maybe 2. And then 2003, they became a midfield team. And then they didn't really become like a podium scoring team until 2005. So, that's really the example we need to look at in terms of what Audi need to avoid, is what, Toyota have done. And I think in hindsight, Toyota should have bought a team like, say, the Jordan F1 team or something like that to get as best a start in Formula 1 as possible. But they decided to go their own way. And, it led to 0 race victories in, 7 years or 8 years. So that's what happened for Toyota. I think what Audi are trying to do is they're trying to go the Mercedes route, which is probably the most sensible way of doing it. Of course, Mercedes, they were an engine manufacturer for a long time and then eventually decided that they could go it on their own. And then they bought, of course, the best team in F1 from 2009, who happened to be a team that was desperate for still, finances, despite being the best team in Formula 1, Braun GP. And then, of course, you see what it led to. So I think what Audi need to do is they need to buy a team. They need to buy the biggest or best team they can realistically. Realistically, they're not going to be able to buy McLaren. That's not realistic. I think they need to be aiming more for Alfa Romeo and Williams in terms of buying a team. But yeah, McLaren, I just think that's a bit too. If they could pull off a deal to buy McLaren, I don't want that to happen. But if they could, from their perspective, that would be an amazing deal for Audi to pull off. But I just don't think it's realistic. So yeah, I think Audi should probably be focusing on buying a team like like Williams or Alfa Romeo, or even if Renault decide in 2 or 3 years that they don't want to be in Formula 1 anymore, then you could buy the Alpine team. Of course, out of Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Williams, Alpine have been consistently the better team for years. So yeah, I think that would be maybe an option for them. Renault, be interesting to see what they do in the next few years, whether their commitment does waver. We've got these rumours about the Andretti F1 team coming to Formula 1 in 2024, and Andretti claimed that they've got a deal with Renault for Renault to supply them power units, so maybe Renault will stay, we'll have to see. But before I move on to the midfield teams, I'm going to come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say and to answer any questions you guys have about what I've talked about so far. Make sure to keep posting your comments in the chat and also the comment section down below. And yeah, for the live chat, I'll try and read out as many comments as I can before we move on to the other teams. Also got to talk about a couple news stories quick before we move on to the later part of the stream. So yeah, make sure to keep posting comments in the chat. Just want to say, don't forget, guys, I will be live at 5:45 p.m. UK time, which is in exactly, I think, 2 hours from now, for Practice 3, for the Practice 3 watch-along. And then I'll be live at 8:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch-along for the Miami Grand Prix. So don't forget to come along to those streams. And also for the streams tomorrow for race day. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at HD5. Now, let me just try and find what I was going to talk about. Apparently, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to talk about. So the drivers are complaining about the track has very poor grip offline, and according to Pirelli, it's because of the cars are kicking up small stones from the track surface, but the drivers were rather concerned about what could happen on Sunday in terms of overtaking. Let me just read out some comments here. Sergio Perez said it was really disappointing that there is no grip offline. It's a shame because I think the racing will be bad due to that. As soon as you try to go offline, there is no grip. It's damp. Probably it's wet on that side. It feels gravelly offline. So yeah, racing will be hard. Not a good thing. Lando Norris echoed Perez's comments. He said that it's extremely tricky. It's very bumpy in some areas, which was maybe not quite what we were expecting. I think everyone was expecting it to be very smooth and beautiful, but it's not. The surface is very tricky as well. You go offline anywhere and it's pretty much game over. You spin and you end up in the wall, so it's punishing. That's why we've seen quite a few people ending up in the barriers. But yeah, so that is definitely a negative. I mean, the grip offline should improve as the weekend goes on, but it won't improve that much. Definitely not as much as the grip online on the actual racing line. Maybe they should, try and go offline and try and, grip that part of the track up if they want it to be grippier. I'm not sure what you could really do about it, but really, this is what you get, don't you, with a new circuit, especially around a street circuit, is offline. It can be very dirty, very dusty even at times, and yeah, I think absolutely we could see plenty of lockups, people going wide in the race on Sunday. I think we can absolutely see that happening for the drivers. Hopefully, we'll get a good race on Sunday, but looking at the track, I mean, I think we'll get overtakes on Sunday. I think it's definitely possible to overtake with the two long straights we have, and also the final two corners are flat out, and then it leads onto a third DRS straight, which is the pit straight. So I think we'll get overtaking for sure, but maybe not as much as was hoped. So yeah, I think it's going to be a tough race for all, not just because of the grip, but also the temperatures. The tyre wear is probably going to be a bit bad for most of the teams. So yeah, it's going to be a tough race tomorrow. Very tough race. Probably a race of attrition, to be honest, around this Miami track. But I'll just quickly show some other pictures, and then yeah, let's come to you guys in chat to see what you guys having to say. By the way, great to see so many of you watching. 525 and going up even more. The viewerships. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, plenty more still to go through. So yeah, we'll get into that soon enough. And right, let me just read out some comments here if I can. By the way, I want to read this one out from CY Motorsport, who is actually Cranky Yankee F1, who I think people know who he is, and I think people remember who he is. Makes very, very good content. I don't think he's made that much content recently, but when he does make content, it is some of the best out there. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. He says, your tyre comment, Merc is a good one, but I bring up Austria 2019. Allison's cars on very hot days tend to blow right through the top end of the window. I think they may be at risk of overheating. You are right with that. Mercedes have always had this. Yeah, and I think it pretty much has been since the James Allison era, where in very hot races, maybe I think what it is I think they expect it to be hot, but I think sometimes the heat of certain races that they come to sometimes catches them out, and they end up not having enough cooling to the car, which ends up causing problems. I think that race in Austria you're referencing, it was incredibly hot. That's got to be the hottest European race we've ever had. It was like 34, 35 degrees Celsius almost. It was incredible, the temperatures that weekend. And I think sometimes they just get caught out with how hot it gets sometimes. But yeah, I think also, what was it, Silverstone 2020 as well, that I think they really struggled there with the heat. But yeah, that's definitely a worthy point to make, but it does benefit them in other areas, like I said, with the tyre warm-up not being as big of an issue. I think also that's probably another reason why Imola, I think that's another reason why it was so poor, is because it was probably the coldest Grand Prix we've had so far. Of course, it was raining for 2 of the 3 days, and even when it was dry, it wasn't that warm, the track temperature, so I think that also hurt them a lot. We've seen plenty of times in qualifying so far this season, them having to do like 2 warm-up laps before their qualifying attempts. It's been a problem this season. Right, let me read out some other comments quickly. Let's read out as many as I can before move on to the second part of this stream. Anton asks, do you think the Mercedes pace is genuine or track dependent? I think it is genuine. I understand, like I said, George Russell's comments about that he thinks certain parts of the track and maybe temperatures are helping them, but I think the upgrades have helped them without a doubt. I think the upgrades have absolutely helped their performance, but still doesn't attack the main problem. The main problem of the car is the floor area. Once they, if they can get that car closer to the ground with every 2-3 weeks that passes, then they will absolutely close the gap to the front 2 teams. I have no doubt about that. Will they be championship contenders? No, I don't think they will. I think they've already, they're already out of contention. Unless in this race this weekend they win, then I think they're absolutely out of contention for that. But I think they can still absolutely get there in terms of winning races again. Be good for F1 if Russell gets pole. Tea Time asks, what's the weather in Miami like? I hear it'll be wet. The problem with looking at the weather for Miami is that a lot of the time it'll just show like thunder and lightning on the weather like apps, but I think that's because it's so frequent that happening in Miami that that they just show that as what the weather's going to be. Let me just quickly look on the BBC weather. Miami, it says 33 degrees Celsius and sunny with a moderate breeze. And then Sunday, it's 34 degrees. And then, yes, sunny and a moderate breeze. So, yeah, it looks as though it's going to be a roaring hot weekend. There's no possible rain or even thunderstorms for Miami until I think the back end of next week. So, yeah. Let's find some other comments here. Glad mid-teams are competitive in this Grand Prix. Merc will surprise everyone. I think they'll surprise some people, but I don't think it'll be enough of a surprise to be like a, wow, they are back. I hope they are, honestly. I know there are some people out there who are like, oh, how great is it that Mercedes are shit? It would be better for Formula 1 if we had 3 teams fighting at the front, which I think is what people were getting very excited about during testing, as we thought it'd be Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari fighting for the top 6 positions with so many great drivers in that. But it's only been, really, Ferrari and Red Bull, and really, only Leclerc, Verstappen, and at times, Sergio Perez. So if Mercedes can join that fight, yeah, they've won the championship so many times, and I get that, but it would be great for Formula 1 to have 3 big teams, absolutely colossal in size, fighting for the front 6 positions on the grid. Josiah says, I think Hamilton takes pole. Tonka, great to see you, by the way. in chat says, it's a low drag track. The new parts will help, but the porpoising will be less of an issue at these lower speed tracks. Yeah, these type of tracks, it will be an issue. Let's find some other comments here. Eddie says, nice to watch the new generation on top. Yeah, I think to a certain extent it is nice to see the younger ones, Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris. I guess you could say Sainz is a part of that as well. Nice to see them, being able to fight for those positions. But I would also love, to see Hamilton and maybe even Alonso get up there and fight with them as well. Ryan asks, do you think the current teams will accept an Andretti F1 team? I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, it's not like it's some random American outfit proposing proposing to enter an F1 team. Everyone knows the Andretti name. Everyone knows what Andretti have done in American motorsport and know that they are a serious outfit. They mean business. They're not just going to come in and be, Caterham or HRT. They're going to be a serious team. They're going to try and compete as best they can. They're not just going to be, like I said, a backmarker team with two pay drivers who are just, existing in Formula One rather than actually competing in Formula One. They're not going to do that. And, at the end of the day, the Andretti name has significance in Formula One. Mario Andretti, Formula One world champion. Obviously, we had Michael Andretti in F1 back in '93, and I think he'll be the team principal of the team if they do enter Formula One. I don't see why not. And I think absolutely, another 2 places on the grid that they would make up. I think they absolutely would add value to Formula One, which I think was something that Toto Wolff said a couple months ago, that they need to add value to Formula One, any new teams. I think Andretti absolutely does. I think Andretti probably has a higher potential probably than the Haas team because Andretti have had such, success in American motorsport. So I don't see why they would I don't see why they would not accept that team. Let's find some other comments quick. Paul, how's weather in Miami? It says it's hot and sunny, so I mean I don't know obviously because I'm not there. The weather is never totally correct. We can always I think everyone knows that, but we'll see. Is Merck in the fight for pole, or is this pace in practice a Fugazi? I think it's I don't think they're going to be on pole position. I think they'll probably be. I think the best they can hope for is, say, like Carlos Sainz or Sergio Perez has a poor session, and they end up, say, 4th and 5th on the grid, and only a few tenths behind whoever's on pole. I think that's probably the realistic expectation Mercedes have got to have for this session. When does qualifying start? The official qualifying session starts in 5 hours from now. And then, practice 3 starts in 2 hours from now. Any concern about Red Bull reliability? There's always, for me, concern about Red Bull reliability after what we've seen this season. But you don't know until it happens, do you? I mean, we didn't see anything at Imola. I think what Verstappen had yesterday, I don't think was necessarily a similar reliability problem. So we'll see, but hopefully not. Jabe says, new F1 fan here. Great to have you along. Says, do you think these new tracks favour the more experienced drivers like Hamilton and Seb, or is it still more about the car? I don't think coming to a new track, I don't think it favours anyone really, to be honest. I think it will probably favour. I think it favours certain teams, honestly, more than it does for the drivers, so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, especially if a track doesn't have, a new track normally doesn't have that much grip. If you're in one of the best cars, it's not going to be as big of a problem for you as it would be if you're Alex Albon in a Williams who's, fighting not to be in last place. Or a Nicholas Latifi, of course. So I think it does benefit you a lot if you're in a good car like a Red Bull, Ferrari, or a Mercedes. But I think really when it comes to certain older drivers benefiting over younger drivers at certain tracks, I think that normally plays out around the, say, older, more historic tracks like a Spa, Monza, Monaco, Montreal, Silverstone. I think those tracks you get, those drivers end up being able to navigate those races better, or are able to be closer, maybe you could argue, to the younger lot because they've raced around there for much longer, and of course they know every trick in the book around those tracks. But yeah, I think around a new track, I don't think any drivers have any necessarily have an advantage over anyone else. Let's see if there's any others here I can find. Jam Sargent, who do you think has put in the better performance so far in 2022, Leclerc or Max? That's a good question, actually. I think Bahrain, you have to say Leclerc. Saudi, I'd probably say Verstappen and Leclerc to me were kind of like 50-50 there. Verstappen definitely, and Leclerc benefited from the safety car, getting them ahead of Perez. And it benefited probably Verstappen more, that safety car, than it did for Leclerc. But I think so far this season, you'd probably have to give the edge to Max, but it's very close. I think in Australia and Bahrain, Charles was very, very good. But then again, he was in the best car for those particular Grand Prix, I think. Well, maybe Bahrain not so much, because I think Verstappen and Red Bull were pretty competitive there. But I think definitely Australia, Leclerc, he had the advantage of having the best car, so that definitely helped his performance. I think the reason I would have Max as the better performer as a driver this season is because of what Leclerc did in Imola with his spin. I think that really is the only mark against Leclerc. And I think if Leclerc had not made that mistake, and maybe let's say he had passed Perez and finished in second, I'd probably give the edge to Charles Leclerc. But yeah, that mistake in Imola was so poor from him. Destined for Greatness says there can always be random downpours in Miami, then get sunny and hot again. Yeah, I thought I made that point. I think it was yesterday in my one of my watch alongs. So yeah, I think what was it I said? It'll be like the Malaysian Grand Prix we used to go to in Kuala Lumpur, where it was either disgustingly hot or disgustingly wet. That's what it'll be, weather-wise. The human Pokedex says Lewis has had bad luck within the last couple of races, while George has had the rub of the green. Yeah, Russell has had a bit of luck here and there. I mean, Australia, the only reason Russell finished on the podium was because was it the virtual safety car or the safety car? One of the two came out at the absolute right time for Russell to pit under the safety car and then get out ahead of Hamilton. And then Imola, I mean, maybe you could say Russell benefited from a good start, and obviously Sainz and Ricciardo falling down the order because of the accident. But at the end of the day, Lewis could have saved himself a lot of trouble if he had out-qualified Russell in Friday qualifying at Imola and, finish ahead of him in the sprint on the Saturday. So I think Hamilton has not been at his best this season, but I think I've already said this in a different stream, that it's not totally down to him, but he does have to take some responsibility, as all drivers do. David says, the camera seems broken, I can't see you. Yeah, I don't normally have face cam. I am probably going to try at some point later this year to maybe bring that in, but not at the moment. Red Bull seems to be somewhat holding as of now, but when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, says KY Productions. Christian says Russell on pole to shake the season up a bit. It would be great if Russell got pole, and yeah, he would shake things up a bit. I mean, he's only fourth in the championship and only 10 points behind Max Verstappen, so it would be great timing if Mercedes got their act together now for Russell, because it would probably put him right in the title race with Max and Leclerc. Let's see if I can find any other comments to read, and then we'll get to the rest. No. I'm now going to move on to the rest of the teams. Let's get into them. And pretty competitive bunch, these are the midfield teams. So we'll start with Alpine F1, who are looking back to the kind of form we saw, say, in Saudi Arabia or even Australia. And I think the reason that is because this track just suits them better. I think Imola is just a bit too tight and twisty for their type of car to really work. We've seen in the data so far this season that Renault do have a good power unit and do have some very good straight line speed. Not the absolute best straight line speed, but some very good straight line speed. On par at the very least with Ferrari, if not a tad stronger. So around a track like this with two very long straights, it's going to benefit them quite a bit. Also, Fernando Alonso is thankfully still performing well despite the bad luck he's had this season. He's not let it get him down. And yeah, he's performing very, very well. 5th place he was in practice 2. If he can be just top 7, top 8 on the grid, I think that would be pretty much the maximum of what he can do and a great result. It will be difficult, though, for his teammate Esteban Ocon, I think, to get into the top 10, but he's definitely in that fight between, it's going to be what? Alonso, Norris, I think I said this earlier, Alonso, Norris, Magnussen, Gasly, Ocon, Ricciardo, Bottas, maybe Zhou one year as well. So it's going to be a tight fight, but I think Esteban Ocon will probably end up between 9th and 11th or 9th and 12th, something like that. Ocon has been also pretty good this season. We do have to sing his praises to a certain extent because he is, was he 8th or 9th in the championship, and he's only like 8 points behind Lewis Hamilton. So shows you that he's been pretty good. 7th in Bahrain, 6th in Saudi, 7th in Australia, and then he finished on track 11th at Imola, but had a penalty for an unsafe release from the pits. So yeah, it's been pretty good this season and is way ahead of Alonso in the championship. But like I said, Alonso, if he had not had the bad luck he had this season, Alonso would probably be ahead of Ocon in the Drivers' Championship. And Alpine would be a lot better off in the Constructors' Championship as well. But yeah, Alpine I expect to be one of the quickest midfield teams. And I think this man on screen right here, Fernando Alonso, is going to be in the top 10 for sure. Let's hope Fernando can produce another great performance and maybe produce a performance that, and a result, maybe not similar, but close to what we could have got in Melbourne, which I've already said this plenty of times, but I wish I could turn back time to see what he could have done at that particular Grand Prix, because I think he could have got a podium there for sure. His pace was incredible in that Alpine car. Yeah, hopefully we get a good result from him. Next up is Alfa Romeo, who had a great race at Imola, and then coming into this race in Miami, we're talking up their chances quite a lot about how they feel they have actually a car better suited to this track even than Imola. And Imola, they were probably the 4th or at worst 5th quickest car at Imola, which is probably the best performance we've seen from an Alfa Romeo team since 2019. So yeah, absolutely brilliant to see Alfa Romeo in such a good position again. Now, Valtteri Bottas, of course, he crashed out in practice 1, didn't do practice 2, but like I said earlier, with the pace that Zhou Guanyu showed in practice 2, finishing in 8th place, the Alfa Romeo is quick. There is no doubt about it. So as long as Bottas doesn't make a mistake, Bottas should be up there in the top 10. I think there's another driver that I forgot to mention who's going to be in that upper midfield scrap with, Alonso, Norris, Magnussen, Gasly and that. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, watch out for them because I think they're a bit of a dark horse and I think they could get another impressive result. Valtteri Bottas has been one of, for me, the best drivers this season. I know the Alfa Romeo car's good, but I just think his performances this season have been fantastic. He's been, top 6 finish in Bahrain. Was heading for a good result in Saudi, but then had a problem. I think finished, was it 8th or 9th in Australia, and then finished 5th in Imola, and should have really finished 4th. And if he was a bit higher up the grid starting for that race, you never know, he could have even challenged Lando Norris for 3rd place. So yeah, Valtteri Bottas has been really, really good this season, and I really hope we get to see more of that in this qualifying session coming up later tonight. And also, yeah, Zhou Guanyu, his pace so far this season has been good. I just don't think he's had necessarily the rub of the green so far this season. He definitely is the second driver at Alfa Romeo. He is not as quick as Valtteri Bottas, which, to be honest, it's not that. That's not really a bad thing. I mean, I know people criticize Bottas a lot for when he was at Mercedes, but at the end of the day, he was going up against the best driver of all time in Lewis Hamilton, so I don't know what people expected him to do. And actually, plenty of times around some very, very great racetracks, Valtteri Bottas actually outqualified Lewis Hamilton. So we know Bottas absolutely has incredible speed. So it's not that disappointing, honestly, for Zhou Guanyu to be off the pace of Valtteri, but if he can be only 2 or 3 positions behind him in qualifying, that should be good enough. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, watch out for them. They have got a good car. They just weren't able to show it yesterday because Bottas was in the wall and then he was in the pits all day, or for the rest of the day. And yeah, missed practice too because of that. Now let's go on to Haas F1. I think this is another team we have to look out for in today's qualifying session because, again, if you look back at the sector times, let me just bring the back up again. No, not that. This. Again, Sector 1 and Sector 3 in Practice 2. Haas are pretty much only like a tenth or so, even less than that, behind the top teams. But then in Sector 2, they're one of the worst, which could be because they were not running maybe their power unit in the most, or in as high a mode as maybe other teams were. Because even compared to Alfa Romeo, who are also a Ferrari customer team, they were half a second quicker in Sector 2 alone. So I think Haas have a lot more pace than they've shown so far this weekend. And I think K-Mag, a driver who normally around a track like this and normally in qualifying is super, super quick, I expect to be in the top 10 in this session. I think the midfield drivers you're probably going to get in the top 10 are Alonso, Norris, Magnussen, and then it's really between, say, Bottas, Gasly, Ocon, and then Zhou and Ricciardo for, say, the rest of the positions. But yeah, Magnussen, watch out for him because I think he could, if he really hooks a lap together, like we've seen in the past, he could end up getting a really good lap out of himself and could get a really good result, a 7th or an 8th. I think that's absolutely on the table for Haas F1. Haas have brought a new upgrade to this Grand Prix of a rear wing, so maybe that's helping their performance this weekend. But yeah, Haas F1 looking good. Mick Schumacher, though, given what we've seen from Kevin so far this weekend, Mick has got to be, if he's going to be slower than Kevin, he has to be not too far behind. He has to be. I know Kevin has been better this season. Kevin is very quick. I get that. But this is a new track. It's a new track for everyone. It's not like Kevin has raced here plenty of times before and just has, you know, a great way around this track. Mick has got to be, like I said, if he is slower than Kevin, which he probably is going to be because Kevin has just been incredibly quick this weekend, and also this season, he has got to be only a position or 2 behind him for me. If he ends up being 15th, 16th, and Magnussen is like 8th, I'm sorry, that is terrible. That is a shockingly poor performance. And I think, honestly, Mick Schumacher has been one of the most, if not the most disappointing driver this season. Still on 0 points. I think he's been poor this season. Just lack of pace. Silly mistakes that he's made also so far this season. Also made that mistake in Saudi where he hit the wall where he was looking good. Thankfully, was okay from it, but it was a clear driver error from him and really hurt him there because I think he did stand a good chance of getting maybe a point or 2 from that Grand Prix and getting himself off the mark. Still, of course, hasn't scored any points in Formula 1. So, yeah, hopefully we see Mick Schumacher turn up in qualifying later, but I'll be honest, I don't have the greatest confidence in him. I think he's just not. He's not quite at the level that he one was expected to be at, but he needs to be at if he's really going to survive in Formula 1 and be a good driver in Formula 1. But yeah, let's hope he gets a good result later. And then move on to AlphaTauri. And I'll just adjust this picture quickly. There you go. Yeah, with Gasly, they're looking pretty decent. Gasly's been pretty good so far this weekend. I'm not sure AlphaTauri have overall a good enough car for Gasly to finish in the front 2 or 3 positions in that midfield pack of cars, but I think Gasly absolutely is a contender to get into the top 10. And if he does get into the top 10, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. I just don't think he'll be, top 7, top 8 on the grid. I just don't think that's going to be possible because I don't think the AlphaTauri car is that good. I am a bit surprised, though, by Yuki Tsunoda's performance so far this weekend because Tsunoda, of course, in Bahrain, he did pretty well. At Imola, he was clearly quicker and better than his teammate Pierre Gasly and has had a good start to the season as Yuki Tsunoda. By the way, if you hear any vibrating outside, it's some dickhead across the road from me starting his motorbike up. So you'll have to bear with it for a few minutes if you can hear that vibration noise. He normally just turns it on and leaves it on for a few minutes before going anywhere, which makes no sense to me. But yeah, Tsunoda's been good so far this season, but this weekend hasn't looked on the pace of his teammate Gasly. So yeah, I think Tsunoda's probably going to be knocked out in Q2 by the looks of it. And then yeah, Gasly, I think if he gets into the top 10, I think that's probably the maximum he can get out of this qualifying session. AlphaTauri just simply aren't as quick as they were last season. And I don't think the result we saw Gasly get in practice 2 yesterday is realistic for what he'll do in qualifying. Now let's quickly get into the final 2 teams. Aston Martin. I think we are seeing this weekend really that Imola was a bit of a fluke, and I think a bit of a fluke because of the wet conditions that really helped them, especially Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, who are both very good in the wet and are high IQ drivers, I would say, and are, good enough in the wet to get good results on a consistent basis, like we've seen plenty of times in their careers so far. But around this track in perfectly dry conditions, which we're probably going to get for the weekend, they're not good. They are really not good. They're not as bad as I expected them to be in the dry maybe a month or so ago around this type of track, but they're definitely not going to be competing for the top 10. If they get both cars into Q2, that's pretty much the maximum, I think, of what they can do. And then we'll see where they go from there on Sunday. But yeah, I think in pure dry conditions, I just don't think they have a car good enough around any track, really, to be in the top 10. They do have the big upgrade package, I think, coming either to the next Grand Prix or the Grand Prix after. So we could see this team get into a position where they're, in that midfield fight with Alpine, McLaren, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas, all those teams. We could see that, but at the moment, it's just not possible. They're just like a few tenths of a second away from really being able to compete with those lot. But like I said, a double Q2 appearance, I think, would be pretty much the maximum they could get out of the Grand Prix this weekend. And then finally is the Williams team. And yeah, Alex Albon, I think, has been good so far this weekend. And obviously this season has been absolutely fantastic. Another driver who's been one of the best so far this season, with especially what he's having to drive. Yeah, if he gets out of Q1, I think that's pretty much the maximum of what he can do. Nicholas Latifi, I've got to say, has been absolutely terrible. Let me just go back to this FP2 result. You can see there, he's 1.2 seconds off the pace of Albon, and he was 3.5 seconds off Albon in practice 1. So he's getting better, but he's still an absolute million miles off. So yeah, Latifi not in good shape at all, which is not a surprise. He doesn't have any confidence. The Williams car is pretty dire. So yeah, Williams probably going to end up at the very back of the grid unless Albon can do what he's done so far this season and pull out an amazing lap and get himself maybe a couple positions higher than expected, maybe a 15th or a 16th in the Williams car. But those are the midfield teams, and we'll now come back to some pictures of the front-running teams, and I'll continue to read out your comments in chat. Again, reminder, don't forget, I will be live in about an hour and a half, or not an hour and a half, about an hour and 25 minutes from now for practice 3, to do the practice 3 watch along. So don't forget, guys, to come along to that stream in an hour and 20. And of course, don't forget to come along to the qualifying watch along at 8:30 p.m. UK time, which is in about, the start of that stream is in about 4 hours and 10 minutes from now. Yeah, don't forget to come along to that. And again, if you are new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I'll be doing all of that later. And of course, tomorrow, I've got plenty of stuff coming up as well, which I'll announce and remind you guys of more so later. But let me read out some comments. Also, I've got a donation to read out from Med Samir Ben Ayed, who donates. I don't know what currency that is, but thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much for that. I do appreciate it. Right, let's find some comments of yours to read out. And yeah, make sure to keep them coming in the chat. Hello to Astro Stevo in chat. Great to see you. KY Productions asks, so boys, do you all think that this season will be as good as 2021 as of what we have seen so far? In my opinion, it's not been as good. 2021, I think, is going to be pretty hard to match that season. The first 3 or 4 races of 2021 were amazing. Not just the racing between Max and Lewis, but what Norris was doing, and then Leclerc and Sainz were doing stuff, and the midfield fight was very close. And I just think 2021 is going to be very hard to match. There wasn't that many races in 2021 that were boring. The only ones I can think of were Monaco, probably one of the Austrian races, probably the Styrian Grand Prix wasn't great. And then what else? Obviously the Belgian Grand Prix, but that wasn't a race. Probably Zandvoort, you could probably put in that category as well. And then what else? Mexico, maybe. So there was only like 5 out of 21, 22 races that were, say, below average. That's a pretty good season. I mean, normally in F1 we get at least 7 or 8 races like that. So to only get like 5 at most is pretty great. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard to get to that level, put it that way. But yeah, let's read out some other comments here quick. Have we covered Ricciardo and McLaren already or not? Yeah, I've already covered Ricciardo, but yeah, I think just to remind anyone who's just tuning in, Ricciardo, I think, will probably be like 12th or 13th, maybe 11th at best. Just simply doesn't have the pace of his teammate. It doesn't look that quick, unfortunately. This weekend, let me find some other comments quick. Just trying to find the best ones I can. Seb to Red Bull asks, Jesse, a lot of people keep suggesting. I don't think that's going to happen. I know there are rumours, though, about possible moves for Ricciardo, Vettel, Alonso. I think those are the 3 that are kind of getting mentioned at the moment. There is a rumour about Oscar Piastri might be going to Williams midway through this season to replace Nicholas Latifi. I don't think that's going to happen until at least after the Canadian Grand Prix. I think Williams will allow Latifi to have his home Grand Prix. But I don't think that's going to happen yet. But I think it's definitely possible. And then, yeah, with Vettel, Alonso, Ricciardo, it's hard to say. I mean, for me, I don't think Vettel is leaving Aston Martin. He seems pretty committed to Aston Martin and seems pretty happy in that team. But at the end of the day, if McLaren come calling for him to replace Ricciardo, I'm not sure he'd say no. But honestly, if it is the case that McLaren are looking to replace Ricciardo, which, by the way, I don't what do you call it? I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because Daniel Ricciardo this season and also last season, he just simply hasn't been the driver that that McLaren signed. His value is significantly lower than what they signed him for, and they're probably paying him more than he deserves in terms of what he's done performance-wise. I mean, he's still a very good driver. There's no doubt about that. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like he's a Nikita Mazepin. He's obviously not. He's still a very good driver, and he won a race last year. But when they signed him, they expected a lot more than what they've got. So I would not be surprised if they ended up binning off Ricciardo at the end of the season. I think he does have a contract at the end of 2023, but contracts in F1 mean nothing if the team wants to get rid of you. So yeah, I think definitely that is a possibility. And if he does go, who replaces him? I think it's between. I think Gasly has to. I think his name has got to be in there somewhere. I don't think Perez is going to leave Red Bull now. I mean, I did make a driver lineup prediction video a couple months ago, but it's already been totally proven wrong, because I had Perez going to Ferrari and Sainz going back to McLaren, and I think Ricciardo going to Williams. And who did I have going? Who else did I have going? I think Piastri to Alpine and others like that. And I think it was I think I made that video right before Kevin Magnussen returned. So yeah, it's already massively wrong, which most driver lineup prediction videos tend to be. Tend to be the case. But what do you call it? With McLaren, the only names I can think of that McLaren might want to pursue is Pierre Gasly, maybe Sebastian Vettel, but also I think maybe Alonso. Maybe they'll want to bring him back to the team. I mean, despite how bad the second stint at McLaren was, he did actually leave the team on pretty good terms, considering what happened. So I wouldn't necessarily be, massively shocked if he did go back to McLaren. Also, I do think there is a chance that especially if Alpine want to keep their lineup of Alonso and Ocon, I think there's definitely a chance that Oscar Piastri might get loaned out to McLaren. I think that's absolutely a possibility. But yeah, I think Ricciardo is probably the one at risk of losing a seat if it's out of anyone else. Let's find some of the comments to read out and answer. Do you think Alonso's unluckiness is part of his fault? No, not really. I don't think he. I think he's just had bad luck. I don't think he could have done anything more. I mean, Bahrain, he was definitely slower than his teammates, so he probably should have done a lot better in Bahrain, a track where normally you'd expect Alonso to be pretty competitive. Saudi, he did fine, but just, again, car broke down at the exact wrong time. Australia, the thing with Australia was, because he had that problem that led to him going into the barriers and then starting from, 9th or 10th, it then led to all the other bad luck or bad things that happened in the race, such as he then had to start on... We didn't have to start on the hard compound tyre, but he had to try something different to get up the field, because definitely he had the pace to get up from 9th or 10th on the grid. And then he had, to try something different, and then because the medium compound tyre wasn't maybe working as well as expected, when he did go onto it, it wore out too quickly. And when he did eventually pit, he came out in a mountain of traffic and he couldn't make his way through. Then, like I said, he killed his tyres and then ended up coming in for a second pit stop. And because he started on the hard compound tyre, when that safety car came out around lap 23, 24, it meant, because he stayed out, it meant that he was only really going to get like a few points like 4, 5, 6 points, or 4 or 6 points. Sorry, because no 5 points in F1. So yeah, it just, that problem in qualifying just led to all the other stuff. If he had not had that gear selection problem that caused him to lock up and go wide and crash into the barriers at turn, was it 13 or 14? Can't remember the exact turn. The 90-degree left-hander in the Melbourne Albert Park circuit. If he didn't have that and he qualified, say, 3rd or 4th, he probably would have finished at worst 5th in that Grand Prix, because that weekend he had pretty great pace, I have to say. Bottas is a super fast driver. Yep, absolutely. By the way, great to see Still I Rise in chat. He's been around for quite a while, I think, on this channel. And Still I Rise also says, also Russell is a menace as well. I truly believe Mercedes has the best driver lineup on the grid. Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think they do. I know people, probably there is plenty of people out there who would disagree and say Leclerc and Sainz, but I disagree. I think Lewis Hamilton, again, I still think he is the best of all time. And I think if they can get that car more to his liking, I think he'll definitely be, getting great results again. And he is still at a amazing level. The level he's driving at in the last few years, it's still an amazing level. Even last year, where he wasn't at his absolute best, but he was still at a all-time level despite that. I mean, the last 4 or 5 races, his performances were pretty much perfect, which of course is what makes what happened in Abu Dhabi so sad from his perspective, because he was so good in those last 4 or 5 races and so clutch in terms of performing right when he had to, winning, he would have won 4 races in a row, would he, if he was allowed to keep that win in Abu Dhabi. Still I Rise also says Sainz is making too many mistakes, and even Leclerc throws in a crash every now and then. Yeah, I think with Sainz and Leclerc, I think there's 2 things. There's 2 reasons why their lineup, or that lineup, is not as good as Russell and Hamilton. One, I don't think they're as talented as Russell and Hamilton. I think Russell and Hamilton are just quicker and have overall more than what Leclerc and Sainz have. But I think, consistency as well. I think Lewis Hamilton normally only makes 1 or 2 mistakes a season at most. With Leclerc and Sainz, it tends to be definitely a lot more. And with Russell, he has made a couple really silly mistakes, but not as many as maybe you'd expect from a driver who has previously, before this year, driven a pretty dire car, being the Williams. Astro Stevo says, just imagine what might have been if Ricciardo or Max Verstappen or Vettel had been in that second Mercedes instead of Bottas, or look back at what Nico Rosberg did with it. But yeah, tough gig. I mean, yeah, Hamilton would have had definitely a much tougher job, but I still think Lewis Hamilton would have come out on top in those respective fights. But I think people are going to look back at Bottas, and I think they'll look back fondly at Bottas. I think they will. That's if they actually look at the evidence and look back in a good faith way at Bottas' time at Mercedes. At the end of the day, again, he's going up against the quickest, greatest driver of all time. And he did exactly what was asked of him. And I think he did exactly, maybe not in his last season in 2021. I think maybe that was the only year where he didn't quite do the best he could. But in every other season, I can't fault him for what he did. I mean, and as well, like I said earlier, he also out-qualified Lewis Hamilton at some pretty great racetracks. Suzuka, he out-qualified and out-raced him, and that race at Suzuka that he won was probably the best win of his career. Imola 2020, he got pole ahead of Hamilton. Nürburgring, Silverstone, he's done it twice. Monaco 2021, but Hamilton's car was pretty undrivable by the looks of it. Bottas he did very well. And if you look at what he did in qualifying in his Mercedes time against Lewis Hamilton, if he did that against, if he performed at that level against Sebastian Vettel, he may have beaten Vettel in one of those years. in that car because he was incredibly quick. It's just, when you're next to Lewis Hamilton will just make you look, not that good when actually you are pretty good. Right, I'm going to read out probably 2 or 3 more comments, guys, and then I'll come to the end of this stream because I've been going for, was it an hour and 35 minutes? And, yeah, my next stream only starts in an hour and 10. So, yeah, I'll just read out a couple final comments and then we'll get to the end of the stream here. Let me just find some final good comments to finish on. Astro Stevo. There's Bottas, Massa, Barrichello, Patrese. Great number 2 drivers of real talent, but not champions. Quite. Who's the best out of those? Probably Massa. Nah, I'd say Barrichello. Not Barrichello. I'd probably say Barrichello because Bottas, very, very quick driver, but I think Barrichello was more of an all-round driver. I think Bottas still lacks ability in races sometimes to, when it comes to overtaking, defending his position. Also, his pace is also not that great in a race. I think Barrichello was a bit more, he had a bit more talent in those areas. And also, was pretty quick in qualifying, Barrichello. But again, his teammate, when he was at his peak, was Michael Schumacher. Right, I'll read out this final comment from Still I Rise, who says, I don't know if Leclerc is super fast, though. In terms of pace, it's Leclerc, Lando, Max, Russell. They're all very fast young guns in the same class. Got to give Max the edge at the moment. Yeah, I think they're all very, very good, but I think you'd have to give Max the edge over all of them. And I still feel as though it is, in terms of the tiers of drivers, I think you've probably got Max and Lewis on the top tier, just ahead of the next tier, which would be Leclerc, Norris, Gasly, Sainz, Alonso, Russell, those types of drivers. I still think Max and Lewis are the top 2. And I think on his day, I still think Lewis Hamilton is the best on the grid, or has the ability, to be the best on the grid when he's at his best. But I would say since probably the start of last season, I think Max has been the best driver in Formula 1 since the start of last season. But like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean he is the best in terms of talent and overall career and all of that. Still, for me, that goes to Lewis Hamilton. But anyway, guys, that has been it for this qualifying preview. Thank you guys very much for watching this stream. And again, I'll be live in just over an hour from now for the Practice 3 watch along from the Miami Grand Prix for 2022. So don't forget to come along to that at 5:45 p.m. UK time, which is in, an hour and 5 minutes, I think, from now. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That's also a great place to follow my content. And also, I'll be live at 8:30 p.m. UK time for qualifying, for the qualifying watch along later this evening as well. So don't forget to come along to Practice 3 and qualifying with me later tonight. But guys, until those streams, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.